So let me see.
All right.
And I'm recording. I'm recording on my end. I do that also for safety also.
Yeah, sure. So this is Sal Rodriguez, and Sal is a very funny comedian and actor and all sorts of other things, a rising YouTube personality. And he was a co-host on Grown Ass Men, which was like the spiritual successor to Grand Theft Audio. When I relaunched Radio Titans, Grown Ass Men was a show where I thought, hey, if we're gonna have three guys talking, shit about the world and news and having guests on, let's really do it like from like an all-around perspective instead of three white guys. I got Clive Aden as a black voice and asked Sal if he would represent, as a Latino. And we did it for like a year. And Sal also had a show that's just unbelievable called Sorry You Met My Mother, that he did with his mom. And his mom is a real colorful piece of work. And anyway, so we're going to talk about all that here. So Sal, do you remember how we met, or did I just hear about you and reach out on Facebook, or what?
Hang on, Carl, just 1 second. Let me have I'm having a shot of tequila.
Okay. Enjoy that.
Nothing like $12.99 a bottle.
Wow.
I remember when I met you. I don't know if you remember when I met you, but I met you outside of Story Salon, or at Story Salon on Moore Park.
Oh shit. Okay.
I saw you because I was there seeing a friend doing his Story Salon, and I happened to see you. I saw your story or heard your story, and then afterward, I think I saw you at the bus stop. I think, and I said, "Hey, do you want to ride? I'm driving," and you said, "Sure." So I think I gave you a ride to the metro station. And I believe that was our official introduction, was me giving you a ride from Story Salon to the metro station outside Universal.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool. Yeah. Story Salon. That's a whole other thing. Yeah. So then basically I'll just jump to Grown Ass Men. So I asked you to do this show with me. What were your thoughts about doing a show from, like, my thought was this would be like The View for guys, which is what the LA Times had called Grand Theft Audio. They called us The View for dudes when they did a story on us once. But I thought my attempt was to really make this worthy of being like The View, because by having, all three major races perspective.
Well, thank you. I'd never been called a major race before, so I appreciate it.
Oh, well.
I didn't know that was your plan, Carl. I didn't know that.
Oh, really?
No, okay. I didn't. I just kind of thought it kind of happened. I didn't know that it was that planned out and methodical. And I've never been called the voice of Latinos ever. So thank you for that honor. And unfortunately, I don't know if I can live up to that. Being monolingual. I'm monolingual. I only speak English. So as far as being the voice of Latinos, good luck to anybody listening.
Okay. So then, what's your overall recollection of like doing the show? Any favorite memories or whatever from it, or I'm trying to let you go broad first, and then I'll give you some more specific questions.
I definitely liked the free-for-all approach that Grown Ass Men had, as far as this was during the era of no rules. It was the no rules era, and I think anybody who listens to us will definitely hear that. The studio was fantastic. I loved that view of downtown Los Angeles. So I have nothing but fond memories about Grown Ass Men. Of course, you sitting across from me occasionally falling asleep. I remember that distinctly. I think there was a couple of times you got in a fight with Clive. I think there was once or twice Clive stormed off the set, I thought, which, hey, is kind of dramatic, but makes for good radio. So, but I distinctly remember that. The musical guests, I always thought were, for me, a concern, because we were in an office building. So we might have had a podcast going, but meanwhile, there's attorneys' offices surrounding us. And so I don't know how we ever got away with that. So I was always kind of tense when we had musical guests, but it always worked out. So my memories of Grown Ass Men and Radio Titans definitely involves basically a lot of freedom and a lot of fun.
So, okay. So what specific, or actually there's two specific Grown Ass Men I want to bring up, because one is yet to be interviewed, but has agreed, and the other got interviewed and was a lot of fun. Where there were two of the musical acts that I think caused the biggest ruckus probably in the morning. One, we had the Tall Men, which was a group of cowboys that they did country western songs, and all six of them showed up wearing cowboy hats in our studio and busted into song throughout their hour on the air, like Friday at 10 a.m. in a downtown skyscraper. And then the other was Phil Levitt, the drummer for the band Dada, from the song "I'm Going to Disneyland" in the '90s, and he also runs a band called Seven Horse now. And he got on board on a drum kit that we had in the studio, and he did like a 5 or 10 minute like drum song where he was chanting "bad motherfucker, bad motherfucker, bad," and I talked about that with Clive, and Clive was like, "Yeah, I remember, Carl, your jaw was just dropped." And anyway, it just blew my mind that we were getting away with this. So any thoughts about either of those, if you remember them?
I don't remember any specific musical guests in particular, but I
Yeah.
definitely have. I kind of vaguely remember those tall men guys, because obviously seeing a bunch of tall white guys with cowboy hats in downtown Los Angeles is quite a sight. So I vaguely remember those cowboys, but overall, my two favorite takeaways, and this is very personal for me, Paul Rodriguez, having Paul Rodriguez as a guest. I mean, being a Latino and being a comedian and being a Latino comedian, I mean, he is the Selena of Latino comedians, as far as I'm concerned. So, and I also remember me doing my impression of him from Comic Relief, the original Comic Relief. I gave my impression of Paul Rodriguez. He didn't seem too crazy about it, but I thought I gave my best Paul Rodriguez original Comic Relief impression. So that was definitely an outstanding memory for me as Paul Rodriguez. Also, Fred Thomas.
Ernest Thomas from What's Happening, right?
Yes. Yeah, there we go. Ernest Thomas from What's Happening. That was a big deal for me. I was a huge fan of What's Happening growing up. And to meet Raj face to face and then do the Raj. I did the Raj. Man, that was so exciting for me. I remember those two stand out for me. Paul Rodriguez and Ernest Thomas, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, I got to track down Ernest. Paul, I keep scheduling with, and if you thought you had a good excuse to reschedule once with your girlfriend, it's like Paul unfortunately had a heart attack recently,
Oh
and
no.
he recovered fine at first, and then he was back in the hospital again. So I don't know. I got to check in with him soon. But anyways,
Well,
yeah. So
give him my best if you talk to him.
of course, yeah. No, we talk almost every week. He turned into a really good friend of mine. I was shocked. I mean, it's bizarre. Like I actually ran around LA with him sometimes for the hell of it in his cars. He had a lot of good cars. Okay, so then if obviously can leave out other stuff that you understand, but about the show, Sorry You Met Your Mother, anything you could say about that? Like, how did you come up with the idea of doing a show with your mom? Did you just know, was she always so much of a uncensored, unfiltered live wire?
I would definitely credit a lot of my humor and urge to entertain or urge to create probably came from my mother. My dad was a nightclub singer.
Wow.
So there's some of that in my blood. But as far as, just being silly, definitely my mother. As far as the love of comedy, I mean, my mother was taking me to the Improv and the Comedy Store when I was a kid. My mother introduced me to Jamie Masada at the Laugh Factory when I was a teenager. So my mother kind of tried to groom me towards stand-up comedy.
Was she a comedian herself? Is that how she knew Jamie so well, or what?
I think she knew Jamie just from being a patron. My mother is a fan of comedy, and so she used to go to the Laugh Factory as a patron. And then I think just kind of got a little friendly with Jamie Masada. So when I was about 17, 18, I started getting into stand-up comedy. My mother introduced me to Jamie, you could do that back then. Somebody's mom can introduce them to the owner of the comedy club. I don't know what it's like today, but so definitely I was introduced into stand-up comedy by my mother. So that's always been in my bloodline. But the reason in particular why I started Sorry You Met My Mother is because I lost my co-host of my previous show. I co-hosted a show called Registered Ear Offenders with Chris Z. He's a comic out of Florida, and out of Florida now. And we had a pretty good run with REO. We were on Sirius XM for a while until the whole Howard Stern fallout. We had a had a show on the channel. When that finally went away, we then, I believe, rebooted REO as It's Funny Because It's True, and I believe we rebooted at Radio Titans. So we were starting our new show, Chris and I, at Radio Titans. After about 15, 20 episodes, though, Chris decides to pack it up and head back to Florida. So I was left without a co-host and without a show when Chris left, and that made me sad because he and I think, were really good creative partners. So he left, and I was without a show, and I started kicking around the idea of doing a show with my own mother, because my mother and I noticed we would have sort of interesting conversations. Well, we'd be on a road trip. We'd be driving to my sister's place. A number of sisters or family members, we'd be driving there, and we'd be having these interesting conversations that I don't think a lot of mothers and sons maybe have, and tackling topics I don't think a lot of mothers and sons might tackle. So I thought it was sort of an interesting concept. So I thought about doing a show with my mother, kind of doing a tongue-in-cheek on How I Met Your Mother, calling it Sorry You Met My Mother, because my mother will say something to you that's going to be offensive. She might, dig in you if she sees an opening. That's sort of her style. She's a little bit of a roast comic, if I had to categorize her. And so I thought, let's try this. Let's try a show with my mother as the official star. My mother was the star of the show, and I was the host. So I was the host of Sorry You Met My Mother, and my mother was the actual star.
I mean, you would set her up to be more of a spectacle.
Yeah, I didn't make it about me. Like I wasn't. Of course, there's going to be that crossover when you have a mother and a son, of course, but I wasn't trying to make it about me. I was trying to make it more about her. I would also send our guests a disclaimer. I would send our guest a piece of paper, a Word document, letting them know my mother may say something offensive. She may say something hurtful. Get ready and know that coming in. Well, guess what? A lot of people didn't read that disclaimer. And so they would come onto the show, and they would all of a sudden hear something, and they would look at me. They would give me a look like, save me. They would give me a save me look. And I would say, didn't you read the Word document on the email? So I'm sitting there like, hey, you knew this going into it. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. So my mother would often say something offensive to someone, possibly hurt someone's feelings. And they would look at me, and I would say, hey, she's your problem. And so I was the host, she was the star. And unfortunately, I think a little bit of the stardom got to her head because she would try to call a lot of shots. It was sort of a power struggle sometimes because she was the star trying to call shots, but I was the host and creator trying to call shots. So that was only part of the dynamic, was the power struggle over the show itself, not to mention the actual topics that we try to tackle every week.
Wow. So was there a worst, most shocking thing that she said that you can remember? Because I'll tell you, she is on the Cause Effect, my political talk show. I think 3 people have ever stormed out or been driven out. I think 2 stormed out. And then I'll spare their names because I'm not sure if they want to be in this. And then your mom, I ordered out because if you want me to edit this out, I can edit it out because I don't want to get her in real big trouble with people or you. But she actually said about Barack Obama, who I was not a fan of. I make no bones about being very Republican, but she said, she called him, she said, that monkey. And I was like, what? And because I don't tolerate that, obviously. And I was like, you can't say that. She goes, why not? I just did. And I'm like, no, you gotta go. And she's like, what? I go, seriously, you gotta leave, because this is when we did it live. And I thought, there's no way I can let her sit here or not get branded all over the internet as a guy that tolerated that. So I was like, oh my God. And so she was understandably pissed and she left, but I think she forgave me because you guys came to see my stage show. But
yeah.
But I think she's the one person I ever had to banish in the middle of a show.
Yeah, I mean, how out there do you need to be to criticize Obama and then offend a Republican? I mean, how out there That's my mother right there. You know, she's going to offend a Republican by things she says about Obama. So there you go. That's sorry you met my mother, Carl.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, do you have a favorite worst memory from your show, like of something that was just appalling?
You know, again, going into the show each week, having guests, sending them the disclaimer email, I kind of prepared myself. But the time we had a comic friend on, and he was talking about how he converted to Judaism. He was a Catholic, converted to Judaism for his wife, for his new wife. Oh, my mother wasn't having that. You know, she wasn't as a Roman Catholic. By the way, my mother will be for the first to tell you Roman Catholic, not just Catholic. She's not about the whole Vatican II thing. She's about the original Roman Catholicism. So when our guest said that he converted to Judaism from Catholicism for his wife's sake, oh boy, no, my mother was not having that, and gave this guy such a hard time. And of course, he's feeling uncomfortable. Don't know if he read the email with the disclaimer. And I'm sitting there again going, she's your problem, you know. But that made me a little uncomfortable. I mean, being grown up in Los Angeles and being on the fringe of the entertainment industry, you know, you don't give somebody a hard time about converting to Judaism from Catholicism. It's just not something that is spoken, not something that you do, you know, to make friends. My mother, she doesn't care, so she let him have it. How dare you renounce Jesus to marry a Jewish woman? You know, that was, I mean, she might have not even put it that eloquently, you know. So, but that was the memory that stands out. Is, I mean, you know, how offensive are you going to get? And my mother's going to get there.
So I guess the last thing I should ask is, how did you guys decide to stop doing the show? Was there a big blowout or something else?
You know, doing a show with my mother, I as a comic, as a broadcaster, I valued the show. I really did. I still to this day believe we were at the time the only mother-son internet radio show or podcast. And by the way, I always use the term internet radio. We were indeed internet radio. We were live. So it wasn't just you're listening to a pre-recorded podcast. I believe at that time we were the only mother-son radio show, either internet or terrestrial radio or satellite or otherwise. We were the only mother-son podcast that I knew of. So I was very proud of our show. But at the same time, it was difficult, you know, doing a show with your mother or with a parent who you're kind of, you know, you're on different ends of the spectrum. You know, my mother's never said she's a conservative. She's never identified as that, but I would say she is. And I'm not the kind to go around identifying as a liberal, but I guess I would take that stance sometimes. So it was difficult. It was difficult for me. I don't know if it was difficult for her. But also around that time, I said, you know what? I need to go try to find some work. I need to go try to make some money. So right around, I think we did about 20, 25 episodes. I think it was about half a year, about 6 months. I think it's time to, I need to pay some bills. So I think I went along and tried to find some work. But I'm proud of the show. I'm absolutely proud of the show. I have a lot of fond memories about Radio Titans. It was definitely a lot of fun and good times. Again, I love that view from that building. I love referring to downtown Los Angeles as Frowntown, Los Angeles. So I have a lot of good memories about Radio Titans, about Sorry You Met My Mother, about you and Jake running around the office and the studio. And I think I saw Jake barefoot at least a few times. So yeah, and you know what? Guess what? I'm still podcasting to this day. I'm still on internet radio. It's not live, but we are podcasting. I'm the co-host of the #1 Cobra Kai podcast. It's called Let's Talk Cobra Kai. And
I didn't know that. I read you all the time on Facebook, but I somehow that slipped my mind. That must have a lot of listeners.
Yeah. My partner and I, Jason Connell, he saw the wave of Cobra Kai right back in 2019. Right as he's starting his podcast empire, he asked me to co-host his show called Let's Talk Cobra Kai. And it's caught on. We cover all things Cobra Kai and Karate Kid. We also go into tangents about things related to Karate Kid, things related to Cobra Kai. So we've got about, I think about 60 episodes in the books.
What's it
called?
called?
It's called Let's Talk Cobra Kai.
Oh, okay.
And it's brought to you by justcuriousmedia.com.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, hey, I gotta go, and that was all I had to ask anyway. So thank you. Just please, if you can, relay to your mother my number and say that I'm trying to talk to her as soon as possible.
I will.
And yeah, thanks.
I will. All right, Carl.
All right,
Thanks, man.
I'll send you the video later. Thank you.
Okay, talk later.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay.